Womanjeka, or welcome to this evening's panel discussion on pathways to a career in computing and information technology. I'm Professor Karen Verspoor. I'm the Dean of the School of Computing Technologies in RMIT's STEM College, otherwise known as the Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics College. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the people of the Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nation on whose unceded lands we conduct the business of the university. We respectfully acknowledge their ancestors and elders, past and present. We acknowledge the traditional custodians and their ancestors of the lands and waters across Australia where we conduct our business and do our daily work. Over the past 18 months, you've probably heard people say, how would we have coped with the COVID-19 pandemic without technology? And it's really true. Computing and information technology have made living through this pandemic much easier. If you reflect on other global pandemics, like the Spanish flu back in 1918, there were no computers, no smartphones, no Netflix, and no Zoom. All of the things that have allowed us to stay connected over the last year and a half and keep working, keep studying, and keep in touch with our families. We've met with each other over Zoom, watched performances online, consulted with our doctors via telehealth, and for people who work in offices, we've managed to keep working at home through the lockdowns. Computing and IT help people in many unexpected ways. So this evening, we're going to explore some of the surprising, exciting, and meaningful careers that degrees in computing and IT can lead to. We have a fantastic panel lined up, which includes academics, professionals, and alumni, and a professional alumni, who will share their stories with you and answer any questions you have on all things computing and IT. And I'll be jumping in with some comments along the way myself. So before we get on to it, let's meet the members of our panel today. First, I'd like to introduce you to James Harland. James, over to you.
Thank you, Karen. Good evening, everyone. My name is James Harland. I'm the Director of the STEM Centre for Digital Innovation, which is a new centre developed just this year to drive learning and teaching innovations. So that's me. Thank you, Karen.
Thanks, James. Shekhar, over to you.
Oh, hello. Thanks, Karen. My name is Shekhar, and I'm one of the lecturers at the School of Computing Technology. Thank you.
Thanks. And our professional alumni is Tim. Hi, Tim.
Thank you very much. So my name is Timothy Burke. I'm a manager over in Deloitte in their core business ops, previously platform, sort of the more technical space. And so I am an alumni. I think, when did I graduate? I think it was 2016 now. Way to make me feel old. Yeah, thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tim. And I will be hearing all about how Tim used his RMIT education in computing and IT to build a really great career for himself. Before we start, I'd like to remind our viewers that we'll have 15 minutes at the end of our panel discussion to go over any questions that you might have for our panel. You can submit questions in the Q&A tool on the right at any time, and we'll do our best to answer as many as possible when we get there. So let's get started. Welcome again, everybody. Can you each tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got here? James, let's start with you.
Well, that could be a long story, Karen, so I'll try and keep it as short as possible. And Timothy, I can tell you, mate, you are not old. But certainly, if I look back to when I graduated, that was a lot longer ago. But I think that the key thing that got me into this is the fact that things are always changing and there's always a new challenge to be met. One of the things about this area is that things move on. It's been quite well noted that in the time it takes a university student to graduate, 3, maybe 4 years, it's time to get a new computer because the old one is out of date by now. So that's how rapidly things often move on. And I reflect on how long I've been in this field. I won't tell you exactly how many years because it's a bit embarrassing, but the grayness in the beard is a bit of a clue. That there's so many things now are possible that we could not have dreamt of 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. And that sort of cutting edge, that excitement, that moving on is really what got me into and kicks me into IT now, because there's just so much more now that's possible that 10 years ago was literally a pipe dream. So what you can think of, if you project for another 10 years, you say, well, where is the next iPhone, the next artificial intelligence breakthrough, the next wonderful technology? We're seeing lots of things happening in all kinds of areas, including space, where we've literally never gone before, and lots of other areas that in computing we could never have dreamt of the results. So if you want to come and live the dream, come and work in IT, because the dream now, it will become a reality in, say, 5 years. That's certainly happened in my experience in what we've been doing, and that's continual novelty is what really keeps me involved.
Fantastic. We're really at the cutting edge, aren't we, in this discipline? Tim, can you tell us a little bit about your journey from studying to working?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I think from my perspective, just to take a step back, I think what got me into IT to start with, I started on a computer probably mid-teens or so, and so it was actually fairly late. I think what kicked me into gear was I had this one teacher who he had this little book over in the corner, a little 40-page A4 sheaf, which he'd written for a course probably about 10 years previously, which is Pascal, a language no one talks about now. Anyway, it was sort of my first step into, he gave it to me, and it was my first step into sort of building things. And I hit, it was the ability to create something that you could bring things to life without actually having to go out into the shed to do something. I moved into an apartment, and so it sort of got me into that space where I could actually really start to leverage almost my creativity, to be honest, and you could do whatever you wanted. And so when I actually hit the end of my schooling, I was looking around for, sort of practical areas, and actually what university would give me that education to be able to actually bring something out, instead of, I wasn't looking for theory per se. I was looking for like that intersection between theory and practical. So that was sort of how I ended up at RMIT. How I ended up in consulting is a bit of a funny one. I hit, as everyone who goes through at the moment, the standard process is that companies open up their graduate applications towards the end of every year. And as you get towards the end of your course, you put in your application and you see what comes back, and you can do it sort of the 6 months in the lead up to. So I did sort of a scatter shot across the bow of, probably about 5 or 6 companies. And I got this one back from consulting. I knew nothing about the field, but I decided, I was like, my tech skills are fairly good. My soft skills probably aren't as good as they could be. And so it was literally, that was the entire driver for me to actually get into. And I guess we'll sort of touch on a few things later, but that was sort of my journey through into work.
So you really wanted to challenge yourself, it sounds like, Tim.
Yes, yeah, we can talk about whether that was good or not another time, but yeah, I certainly did.
Look, what you said about wanting to create and innovate really resonates with me. I think that's a really important part of what we do that sometimes isn't obvious, maybe, because, we think about computers as machines, and computers, they compute, right? They calculate things. But the kinds of things we can do with that compute is really exciting. Hey, Shekhar, what about you?
Oh, thanks, Karen. Very different to the experience of the other panel members. I did my honors in physics, and like, who does honors in physics? So that's the reaction you get when I tell people. And my father was a physicist, so he turned around and he said, okay, why don't you apply for a PhD? And, I looked at the PhD programs and they were like 6 years long. And I was like, absolutely no, I'm never doing this 6 years of study. And I just went and got myself an MBA and started my career as a business analyst, and got interested in a lot of programming at that time. These technical people used to sit and talk, and I was thinking, wow, that sounds fascinating. What's that C++ and Java and stuff they're talking about? And that got me very interested. And went and did a master's of technology from RMIT. And it so happened that one of my lecturers just turned around and he said, "Why don't you come and co-teach with me?" And I'm thinking, I have never taught, I couldn't. Anyway, just started it as an experiment and went on just doing my full-time industry job and teaching on the side. I used to come in the evening, I used to teach a postgrad class. Until in 2015, things happened. And the way they happened was that I came here full-time. I sort of made that migration from industry to RMIT and became a lecturer here at School of Computing Technologies. And my job sort of moved from more business to technical, and that sort of got me more and more deeper into technology. And it was fascinating because I would work with the industry, and then I would come in the evening and I would talk to the students. Have you ever wondered, how Commonwealth's website NetBank works? Have you ever wondered how the architecture is and what they do and the other thing? And that sort of got into more and more of teaching. And then I sort of realized, okay, I'm not too bad at this. Maybe, I need to do this more. And eventually got as a lecturer and more deeper into research. And that's my journey. So
fantastic. So you really like engaging with students and preparing students for a career in IT.
Absolutely. That's one of my passions. And I, in fact, wanted to ask you, Karen, we don't want to leave you out. What's your story? How did you get here?
Oh, wow. Well, look, a lot of what you all said really resonates with me. I was really lucky because I went to a school for science and technology where they offered programming, if you can believe that, back in the 80s, right? So like James, I'm a little bit older than Tim. And so in fact, we learned Pascal at that time. But one of the great things that we had the opportunity to do in that school was actually to do an internship in a company. And I ended up working for a company called Network Solutions, which some of you may have heard of because at the moment they actually basically run the domain name services for the internet. So they became a name services registrar. So people, buy their domains from Network Solutions. But back in those days, they were a government contractor, and I grew up in the Washington D.C. area in the U.S. And I found myself there trying to learn how companies could use technology. And I ended up implementing an information system for them to manage their vendors catalog. So they had a whole bunch of companies that they did business with, and basically they needed to manage the information. And so I was hired partly, as kind of a clerical assistant to enter the information. But when they realized that I could do more than just enter data into the system, they got me trying to organize it and put a front end on it. And I ended up building a little app that allowed them to search for information about vendors in particular areas. And, really that was the beginning for me, realizing that I could develop skills that would help people do their jobs more efficiently, help them find information and really just manage information because there was so much of it already coming out at that time. And obviously that's something that's just grown and grown. And I, have become more and more convinced that the only way that we can manage all of the information that's out there is by leveraging computing to organize it and to find it and to help people make sense of all of that information. So that's why I do what I do. Great. Well, I'd like to move back to Tim. You found that your initial career expectations did not quite turn out the way you thought they would. What did you think your career in IT would look like, and how does your current role really differ from that?
Oh, that's a good question. So look, unpacking that one. So what did I think my career in IT would look like? I think it's sort of the same as most people when you go into IT. You have these sort of vague, grand ambitions of sitting there in front of a computer, coding or working in, that's basically, whether it be in security, whether it be in web development, whether it be in systems programming, that's sort of where you expect. You're like, okay, I'm going to be hardcore technical and I'm going to be building things. Where did my career expectations, where did I eventuate? So I'm very much, I've played such a different set of roles over the past years, which have stretched me in multiple different ways. So I've sort of, what does my current role look like? Let me go there to start with. So my current role is in the tech architecture space, is currently what I'm working on. I'm working in sort of a larger, how do you actually integrate larger scale systems and get them working at one of the major banks. Now, if I go backwards, the previous role I was running on was a project where I was running as a BA. The one before that was, actually now this is going to stretch from memory. Before that, I was doing advisory work, tech advisory work at a fairly sort of senior level. And then before that, project management. So I was actually delivering. I did sort of a year-long delivery piece where I was responsible for being I don't know if a project manager, basically you encompass so many different areas, and this was all including scheduling, including costing, and multiple different other areas as well. Before that, I was working in logging and monitoring, and that's sort of something that most people never think about how important it is when you're developing. The things you never think of are code and how to debug the stuff you've actually written after you run it the first time. And then beyond that, before that, I was actually working as a systems administrator for a whole fleet of Windows VMs. And that, I must say, was something I never expected. You come out of uni and you're biased. You're like, I'm going to do Linux. I'm going to do open source. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Then you hit the industry, and unfortunately, things don't quite work that way. You got to reset your expectations very fast and understand that there are reasons why all sorts of different tech gets used. And so I think where I am, I'm in sort of a much broader range. I'd probably call myself a generalist at the moment instead of specialization. And it's definitely been a journey to get here.
So in that journey, what do you think you learned? Did you sort of learn something about yourself, or maybe something about technology along the way?
Oh, I've learned a lot of things about myself, and definitely a lot about technology. I think the key things around technology for me that I've learned so far is that it is a tool. There are many different tools in the shed, and there's no point in clinging to one, because there are good reasons to use any specific one. You've got a whole set of drivers, and as long as the tool fits what you're doing, use it. Don't get too attached to it. It's changed even since when I left. So I'm watching it change every couple of years, and you're just seeing it. Just by the time you start uni and when you finish uni, it will have completely changed. And the same language, React, was different from when I started uni to when I finished. Same as a few others. I think that's what I learned. That's one of the main sort of simple lessons that I learned about tech. About me, it was a funny one. I started off as a very tech focused, and I actually, in pushing myself those other areas, I have found that I quite enjoy the enabling aspect in terms of that project and project management, the ability to take the knowledge I have from multiple different spaces and then enable other people, because it's a really weird space. Well, when I say weird, let me just qualify that. It's one which is often overlooked about how important it is.
Yeah, so really, I think what you're talking about there is bringing the technology together to solve problems, and maybe, like I said earlier, help people do their work more effectively, gather the information that they need and kind of get an overview of what's going on in the business. And, like you said, there's all sorts of different tools that you can use. And depending on what problem it is that you're trying to solve, you're going to have a different way of solving it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. I mean, I think what you're pointing to is that, computing and IT is actually really diverse, and it can be applied in many, many different areas. I didn't mention it earlier, but my main focus is actually in biomedicine. And when I talk about trying to, like organize information and help people find information, a lot of what I'm talking about there is helping scientists to keep track of the latest research results, the latest medical evidence that's appearing in the scientific literature, and even helping clinicians dig through electronic health records in order to try to find information that's buried in these records that's relevant to a clinical decision. And so, there we're talking about using computing, using technology to really, again, help people do their jobs, and requires a whole constellation of solutions to a whole diverse set of problems. But the impact of it is really about the clinicians or the scientists doing their work and helping them. So James, what excites you?
What excites me? Crikey, how long have we got? I could probably go on for a long time. There's a lot of exciting stuff happening. I guess a lot of my recent work's been in what we call artificial intelligence, and particularly in an area called intelligent agents. So if we've got something like the Mars rover or something that has to be autonomous, it's got to work its way up there. It's got to think about, well, what do I do in certain situations? How do I keep track of the various things I have to do? For example, it can only be out during the Martian day. So it's got to schedule its tasks to be constrained within that particular time. So how do you make sure that you have your batteries charged, you take advantage of any science opportunities, you make sure you do equipment maintenance? So you've got to be kind of reactive and proactive and almost human-like in the intelligence you do. So having that sort of attraction to say, how do I make this thing smart? How do I make it react? How do I make it think like a human would? That's one of the many challenges that excite me about various things we're doing. I think one of the things about my current role, which is far more focused on making learning and teaching a better experience for our students, is to bring that same artificial intelligence towards the sort of teaching tasks. So, for example, a common complaint that people like Shekhar and myself has is the number of ability we have to keep up with questions that students have so we can give feedback. But if we've got large classes, that becomes difficult. But we're now getting to a point we can probably have chatbots and other kinds of artificial intelligence that can actually help with that kind of process. So it might be, rather than having to email a question to a lecturer who might be having dinner, might have be in a meeting, might have other things, you get an answer straight away from a chatbot that gives you the same information and probably in far more concise form than a babbling old idiot like me. So in that sense, it's actually probably a better experience to say, let's get the chatbot to answer your question or filter through the queries. It'll be on 24/7. It won't get tired. It won't forget. It won't make a typing mistake. So it's actually probably a better experience. And I think we're seeing a lot more of being able to draw on that technology that you talked about, solving various problems, to including solving the problem of giving students the best possible learning experience. And that I find really exciting.
Yeah, fantastic. So for you, your users that you think about are students. And for me, my users might be clinicians or scientists. And for Tim, they're businesses that need to make decisions. What about you, Shekhar? What gets you excited?
Oh, as James said, how much time do we have? I think what really gets me excited is the human side of technology. We often, we lose sight of the whole human interaction. We love talking technology and we love learning tools. And as we're getting more reliant on AI and data science and all the other technologies, there is that whole human angle that we sometimes don't focus on. So I'm quite interested in that. I also love talking and also sort of love researching and sort of studying about how our employability trends are changing for technology students. There's so much changing. What do we really teach our students? How do we prepare them? As Tim said that, I remember Tim being in the class and we talked about a language and 3 years later, we both can't recognize what we taught 3 years ago. It's completely transformed. So let's say within that period of 3 years, if the student has finished a degree, how will they cope with all that change. So I'm really interested in sort of understanding and sort of delivering and imparting that sort of knowledge to students. In terms of new technologies, the Internet of Things is really fascinating. It really fascinates me. I've done some work in that. And you know, one of the things that I really always tell even my students, you know, what if I were to teach you one framework and then you learn the second one on your own? Can you do that? And you know, that's the kind of knowledge I want to give to them, because when they go there, they won't probably hear the same words and the same things, but you know, they can say, okay, I have that kind of knowledge and skill, I can pick it up. So that's really very important to me, and I love understanding from a student's point of view what really interests them. You know, what was really that. You know, I often ask them in my class. I say to them, to tell me about one subject that you love. And one of the subjects that often appears in their list is taught by James. It always is there. You know, they love James lectures, and they say, oh, that was fascinating. And learning from them, changing things, making it fascinating, those kind of things are quite dear and near to me.
Yeah, so you know, really one of the things that you're highlighting is that we need to be resilient to change. We need to have foundational knowledge, but we need to also be able to adapt it in new circumstances. And it's really true. I mean, you know, computing and technology has changed drastically since the 60s and 70s when it first started to be kind of more broadly used. And you know, Tim, you mentioned Linux earlier, and yeah, we definitely don't do things on Linux so much anymore. The command line kind of scares a lot of people, right? And we have much more effective ways of interacting with our technology through graphical user interfaces and voice command, you know, with Siri and Alexa and all these things. And all of that reflects massive change in the technology and innovation. And so it's really important to recognize that, you know, when we're talking about computing and IT, we're not talking about something that's static, that's going to be the same in 2 years as it is today. It's constantly changing and constantly evolving. And I think we all live that every day. You know, the way we access our bank accounts is completely different than even 5 years ago. You know, we started talking about the pandemic at the beginning, and I've often noted that, you know, we didn't have the NBN in place 2 years ago. So if the pandemic had happened even just a couple years earlier, we would be, you know, probably in a very different kind of situation than we are now. So that brings us to our next question, which is really, what are the qualities that are required to succeed in computing and IT? Shekhar, we'll come back to you. You won a Vice Chancellor's Distinguished Teaching Award in 2015, so you're really well placed to answer this question. What do you think are the most important skills that someone needs to become great in this field?
Well, I'll tell you this. When I actually got that call, I thought one of my students had my phone number and was trying to make a prank call. So I just turned around to this person and I said, don't you have anything better to do? And I hung up like 3 times. And the 4th time the person said, no, but I work in Vice Chancellor's office. This is not a prank call. So I was like, okay, then apart from the certain period of shock when I realized that was true. I think that one needs to really have that sort of passion for learning new things. That's never going to stop. If you are going to make a pact with technology in your life, if you're going to do something in the field of technology, you have to go prepared that this is a lifelong learning experience and it's not just one of those cliche terms. So you have to keep reinventing yourself. That is very important. Apart from that, one of the other things that is very important is the need for soft skills. the technical skills, yeah, of course, you're in your field, you have to know what you are dealing with and what you're teaching or what you're working at. But I think that the soft skills are very important. You need to have a good understanding of working with people, and more so in this COVID era, when the teams are more global and they're digital, and there is a higher need for a person to exist in such environment, and they need to know about these things. And I think finally, the thing that matters the most is it's what do you make out of a technology? I mean, yes, you can learn a technology. Anybody can learn a technology, but if you really want to be good at it, you have to be really passionate about what you are doing. If you're not passionate, because often what happens is I would talk to a student and I would say, look, you did not do well or you did well, and what do you want to do? And they would turn around and they would say, look, I'm only doing this because someone told me to, and that there are so many jobs. And there is so much of a difference in what the output that student produces versus someone who is so dedicated. So the thing is, technology is very strong sort of a thing, So the point is, if you really are going to get into technology, be very passionate about it, and you have to keep learning, as I said earlier. So that those kind of things are very, very important, because things are going to change at a very fast pace.
Yeah, look, you mentioned soft skills, and Tim mentioned it earlier as well. So maybe I'll pass over to you, Tim. Do you think that that's true, that those soft skills are maybe equally important as the technical knowledge for you in your job?
Yeah, so this is one that I feel I am quite passionate about, to be honest, because I've been through the journey of getting into a role, and then I often see a lot of graduates come in as well, and for me, the technical skills are absolutely important. There's sort of having a soft skill, but not the ability to back up what you're saying is one thing. But what that misses as well is just the fact of, unfortunately, what we often look at, and maybe when we talk about career expectations, back to there, you have that picture of the heroic sort of work all night, get something done, etc. But the reality of it is, in the end, you are part of a team, and it's only as part of a team can you actually sort of accomplish the size of the projects which I work on. You can only you actually need other people with the right skills to be able to achieve something. And so it comes down to, for me, when it comes down to soft skills, the most important one is to be able to engage. And that will hit you as early as your interview. You walk into an interview, you can't engage the person, you're not going to have a very good experience. If they can remember your name after you've walked out the door, that's fantastic. And that's nothing more than conversational and literally just starting a relationship with someone. It has to surface level, maybe or maybe not, but interacting. Then beyond that, so I've had to work in my work as a project manager, and sort of especially in consulting, where you're expected to be able to pick something up very fast, go learn it yourself and turn it into something. And when it came down to project management, it was an extremely hard learning curve, because I basically had to all of a sudden be responsible for people who were both multiple levels above me and multiple levels below me. And it was a challenge, because I was working with people. There are behaviors, there are clients, there are financials, there are senior stakeholders. There are all these people, and you are basically an intersection, and you need to manage them, and you've got to try and achieve an outcome. And so it's one of the things. So soft skills for me have probably been the one thing that have been carried me so far. Because that has to be honest, it's what set me apart from many of the other people who have the same technical skills as me, or potentially even better. It's the ability that I've had to merge the soft skills and learn them and build them with the tech.
Yeah, look, it's a really important point. I mean, at the end of the day, the technology that we're building is going to be used by people, and we need to take their needs into consideration as we're building it. And so you have those user stakeholders, and of course, you're going to be the first guy to hear about it if there's a bug and something goes wrong and it doesn't work the way they expect it, or they can't find the information they're looking for in the obvious place, and so forth and so on. But then there's the other side of it, which is that these applications and technologies are often huge pieces of software. And so you have to coordinate that activity of multiple people in order, working towards a common set of objectives and goals. And yeah, it's tricky. You're right. It definitely requires a lot of soft skills. James, what's your take on this? What makes a good computing person?
Again, this could go on forever, I think. I want to echo what Tim and Checker have said. I think they're on the money there. I think what I could add to that, I think, is to say that it really helps to have a particular motivation. I know when I was a young man back in the Jurassic era, it was enough to get into IT because it was kind of trendy. I don't think that's really a good motivation, though, to be honest. I think there's a lot of things, picking up what you said about, the world has to want what you're providing to some extent. Find a social problem, find a problem that needs solving, and find a way you can bring IT to that problem. Be it climate change, be it pandemic control, be it bushfires, be it social agendas, whatever it might be. There's always going to be an IT component to any solution to a big problem like that. So that's probably the way to think about it. It's not, yes, it gives you a career. Yes, it's in demand, but there's got to be that, to pick up on that passion that Shekar was talking about, there's got to be a reason why we do what we do. And if the reason is to build better technology, well, that's kind of fun, but not really going to sustain things. If your goal is to find a solution so we can beat this pandemic, then that's obviously going to be far more significant, as well as far more motivating in the times when you have to struggle. So finding that particular focused motivation rather than I just want to get into IT, but I want to have a purpose for what I'm doing, I think is important. The other thing I'd stress is also picking up on something Tim said, that need to be flexible, because where you end up with IT is going to be very different from where you think you're going to end up. I think if I took a common thread from all of our stories, it's saying, would you expect to be where you are now when you started out? I'd certainly say, I'd laugh several times sideways if you told me where I ended up where I thought I was going to be. And I think having that flexibility of mindset to say, well, this could go all kinds of different ways. I remember several years ago now, there was some graduates of ours involved in when the government of the day was selling off some electricity price companies. And there were software engineers in the room that day that, here's a blank bit of paper, tell us what we should do. And they were saying, we're techies, why are you asking us? And say, it's exactly because you are technical people why we are asking you. So it's having that flexibility to say, all right, what are the problems that need solving? And rather than saying, I've got a particular mindset, I can program, I'm a software engineer, I'm a tester, and limiting your own abilities with that particular mindset, rather than saying, I'm a flexible problem solver who can apply technologies to solve problems. What do I do next? So it's that sort of flexible mindset, I think, is very important as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I always say, if you want a problem solved, get a bunch of computer scientists in the room, because that's what we do. We as soon as a problem is posed, IT people start to try to break it down and work out the steps that are required to solve that problem. I think that's a very something that tends to come very naturally for people in IT, because you have to take what's a really big kind of problem or a big task, a big system that you need to develop, and you need to break it down into those component parts. And so we just are natural problem solvers, that's for sure. So if you're a problem solver, IT might be for you, definitely. Well, I might just ask you, maybe related to that, when we picture somebody in computing or IT, the image that often comes to mind is that of a geek, usually a guy, just saying, usually in their 20s, glued to their devices, and more of an introvert than a social butterfly. But I guess you can look at this panel and listen to what everybody's saying about their lived experiences as technical people and realize that that's really a gross misrepresentation of reality. I'm certainly not a 20-year-old male glued to my device. And I do happen to like talking to people. So maybe, Shekhar, what's the biggest misconception about computing and IT professionals from your perspective?
Oh God, I mean, whatever is there, I've listened to it all. I mean, one of the biggest ones that I hear is that if you're good at your technology and you're that sort of arrogant, very bright person, you're amazing. That doesn't work. That doesn't work in today's industry. You won't survive a day with that. So that sort of tech obsessed person who's antisocial, does not like people, likes to work in the basement mentality it's just a big gross misconception. I think even when I look at my day-to-day work, I have to go and talk to people. I have to liaise with them. I have to, as Tim said, I have to sometimes deal with people above me, and there are people who are below me, and sort of trying to bring some sort of synergy to my work. So the present day work is very more dynamic and very much people focused. And there is multiple points of interaction. So I don't think that if anybody is looking to get into technology, they should do it because they don't like talking to people and that kind of attitude. It doesn't work.
Yeah, no, and especially because we're working in teams and we have stakeholders that we need to talk to. It comes back to those soft skills, right? You can't, if you're a complete introvert, you're going to struggle a little bit, maybe even to get the requirements of your system out of your users. So thanks for that. Tim, you're an RMIT alumnus. Can you tell us about the student experience at RMIT? And did you maybe participate in some clubs or societies?
Yeah, so look, my experience is probably a bit different from what people have been experiencing in the past 6 months and will be for the next 6 months at least. But mine was actually, it was quite enjoyable. I worked through the entirety of uni as well, so my time was limited. But I was involved quite heavily in the security club. That was a very enjoyable one. I think the fun part that I found was that no matter what sort of interest you had, there was always people around. And the funny part was the security club didn't actually exist before I joined. It was a group of 5 or 6 of us who ended up, I think by the time I left, there were 40 or so. It was a really fun place to learn and to just be able to find like-minded people, which you just turn into this group which you can cross-pollinate. It was building 12, building 80, and building 81, where I think I lived, and it was a really really fun place. It was both I have a lot of fond memories of sort of late nights preparing for assignments, and not only that, but also the other times where you were then trying to get de-stress after the exams, after the work. The other part as well, just to also touch on as well, is I ran into a particular tutor day one. I didn't know he was a tutor or anything. He was a former alumnus as well, and I was looking at it and I was going, well, I want to do comp sci, and he was like, well, you're in the IT course, and what you can actually do is you can start to pick out pieces from everywhere you want to, and what are your interests? We had a really good conversation, and he found out that I had quite a big interest in networking, and it was what he told me about was the fact that there was also the ability to do the Cisco networking minor, and that got me to stay in IT, because that was actually one of the real joys that I had through my experience at RMIT, and it's one which actually talking with a lot of other IT students coming out of other institutes, they didn't have that same opportunity. Sorry, anyway, that last part was a bit of a ramble from me, but yeah.
No, I mean, look, you're speaking to the diversity of the different areas of IT, and actually, it's hard to cover everything that's out there in IT. When you study, you can only take so many courses, and there are a lot of options out there. And you mentioned cybersecurity. There's cloud computing. There's AI. There's data science. There's so many different dimensions to what it means to be in IT. I liked your point about how the club was really important to you, and helped. Well, your friends gave you advice, your fellow students gave you advice, and one thing about the pandemic, I actually met with some representatives of our programming club. So there's a programming club now, and I asked them what was the one thing that most impacted them during last year, and they basically said, programming is a lot more fun when you can do it with friends. And I thought, yeah, that's really true, because a lot of programming is digging into details and nutting things out. And if you have somebody to bounce ideas off of, it's a lot easier to kind of, work through some of the challenges you might be facing. So I thought that was an interesting response, because it kind of addresses, the clubs are really important, and that social network and the peer support that you referred to are all really important elements of a student experience. And it's harder to do that online for sure, but, we're still trying to make those opportunities available to students where we can. Definitely. All right. I think it's time for some questions from our audience, and we've had quite a number of them come through. So, James, I think the first one is for you. What courses does RMIT offer in computing and IT, and do they include internships?
Okay, again, that's got quite a long answer, I suppose. Well, I'll keep it as short as possible. I guess we have our four main undergraduate courses are in computer science, software engineering, IT, which is one that Timothy mentioned, and a new one called data science. Now, the only one that requires an internship is software engineering. So you do essentially the same 2 years as computer science, do a third year of an internship, and then a fourth year specialising in project delivery. Whereas in computer science, you do a third year that's more technically focused on becoming the next driverless car programmer, AI wizard, or things of that particular nature. So I guess the computer science degree is probably the most technical for those who want to end up in those highly priced cutting edge fields where, what is it, Karen? Data is the new oil? Is that the phrase? If you want to be someone who does that sort of mining, well, computer science is probably the go for you. Software engineering has that third year, which is 12 months of experience of internship. But I guess having that first 2 years in common gives you a technical platform, which you can then apply to things like technical project leadership. So you do a lot more work on focusing on projects, delivering them on time, to budget, within specification, and so forth. So it's a slightly different path, but similar kinds of roles. Perhaps you might have a software engineer graduate leading a team of computer scientists working on how to solve problems for the space industry or something like that. The IT one that Tim mentioned. Sorry, I'll keep.
Sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
The IT one gives you a bit more flexibility. As Tim said, the IT program gives you a technical foundation, but an ability to pick and choose particular areas, perhaps combining it with business or other kinds of outcomes. So you probably have a different sort of career there because it's technically focused, but also combines some other broader skills. So somehow combining the IT basis with other kinds of things like marketing, accounting, finance, or Japanese, archaeology, if you wanted to, in principle. So it's having that sort of combination of skill for what you would like. Finally, data science is a very new one, just started this year, which is more mathematical and perhaps less broadly focused computing, but more about being that sort of oil miner for the data and how you actually process, extract and interpret data in that sense. So the career outcomes are all overlapping, but they are somewhat distinct from each of those. I can probably go into those in more details offline if there's particular questions about particular careers. Sorry, Karen.
Yeah, that is one of the next questions actually, is whether you can go for the same kind of roles with these different kinds of degrees, or whether you're sort of tracked into different areas if you pick one over the other.
I don't think you're necessarily tracked into it, but of course the difference between the courses might be you have different skills to bring. So, for example, someone like Tim probably benefited from the breadth of the experience that you got in the IT program to be able to apply that in the current role. That's not to say someone doing computer science couldn't do that, but there's probably a better fit for that sort of role from an IT graduate. So it's not like you're shutting off options by doing this. It's more that there's particular roles that are going to be more focused on particular skills. Again, without going into an essay in the details, that's probably the best way to answer that in this kind of forum.
Yeah, fantastic. Shekhar, there's a question that's come through for you. What kind of background do you need to study these courses? The questioner says, I'm 25 years old and I'm concerned that I don't have the right skills. I've done a few short courses in business and I work as a finance operator full time. I'm interested in front and back coding. Are they ready to come study at RMIT?
That's a very good question. In fact, look, I mean, if you want to get into an IT program, then you can come from any background. Your background that you mentioned is not really a deterrent. So no, that shouldn't be a worry that if you have done some business courses. We don't want you to be prepared fully to enter some of these programs. It's like, our job is to prepare you. However, if you want to get into computer science or software engineering or data science, then you do need a background which is different to that of the one who would enter into an IT program. What I would like to say here is that sometimes the student comes in and they're not very sure because they're jumping ships from a different background like yours. What I would suggest is that you could start with a program and then there are pathways of changing it. Sometimes they will get into an IT because they didn't have the right kind of mathematics background or something like that to get into a computer science program. And then they could do a year of IT and then they could do well. And then there are pathways available to go to the other one. When you say front and back end coding, look, some of these things can be achieved in any program, depending upon the electives that you actually do. So my answer is, with your background, you should be able to get you should apply for IT programs.
Yeah, so I think the key difference there really is the mathematics and the entry requirements for the different programs. The Bachelor of IT, as you suggest, is the most flexible in terms of the background that students can have. And in fact, we have more pathways into the Bachelor of IT than we do the other degrees. For instance, students can do an associate's degree in IT before they move into a Bachelor of IT if they're not, 100% sure that they want to commit to the full bachelor's degree, or maybe they don't feel entirely ready for that. The associate's degree pathway is good. But I think, if you have the mathematics background and particularly math methods in year 12, then there's no other really requirements. We don't assume that you've had any programming experience before starting the degree. We don't assume that, you've been in the robotics club since you were in year 8, none of this. We take you as you are, and as long as you have the kind of foundational background, you can be successful. And in fact, this year, we've started a new initiative that we call the Boot Camp to Studio model, which really walks students in a very hands-on and interactive way through the process of learning how to program. And we definitely do not assume. Now, if there are students that have some previous programming experience, I encouraged my own kids to do a little bit of programming. We did Scratch when they were 10, I think, and you may have had some experience in high school. That's okay, but we're not going to assume that you have that background. And in fact, that will just give you a little bit of an advantage in the first semester, really, and give you a starting point that's maybe a little bit further along than some of the other students. But at the end of the day, we're trying to bring everybody up to the same level, and so we don't make those assumptions. James, what programming languages do you teach, and how do you stay up to date with all the changing languages, since we've talked about that a little bit today?
Sure. Well, I don't teach any particular language myself, but in the courses you come across Python, Java, C++, and possibly others depending on your particular choice of electives. You might have some that involve Ruby or other kinds of languages like that. So look, we do teach a variety, and I think it's important that we don't just teach one language, because as anyone will tell you, if you know one language, you don't really know how to program. So in that sense, we try to encourage people to be technologically adept, to say whatever needs doing, I'll adapt to whatever that language is. So there's not just one language, there's a variety. Staying up to date is a bit of a challenge for most aspects of IT, but I think part of it is being engaged with the industry means we really do try and keep a pretty close ear on industry trends. So that means if we hear things like, look, React is something that's quite important now to do more front-end programming than, say, back-end ones, then that's something we can incorporate. So whilst it is a challenge, it's actually not as hard as it might seem to keep up to date. As long as we engage with our various stakeholders, it's usually pretty easy to say, here's what we need to be doing. So keeping up is not the biggest challenge. It is something we have to do, but it's not perhaps, that the most, doesn't keep us awake at night, shall we put it that way.
Great. Shekhar, there's a question, again, building on that maths question, around the maths requirements for studying the Bachelor of IT. And the questioner asks whether there are any bridging or extra classes that they could take to help them kind of get ready for doing that. And the third part to the question is, how maths focused are the degrees? So the theme there is maths. Tell us a little bit about maths and IT.
I think both you, Karen, you and James have touched upon that, so I'll just add to that. The computer science and SE degrees are more math focused than the IT one. There you would do multiple courses on mathematics, and some courses have a more mathematical bias. They may not have a mathematical name, but you have to be more mathematical. As far as the IT degree is concerned, you would have done some basic math up to year 10, and that should be fine. Are there any bridging courses? Absolutely, there are always bridging courses available that can help you to get along. So sometimes the student, as I said, comes into IT, then realizes, oh, no, I think I can do more. I want to get into computer science, but I couldn't get because of my entry requirements. And then they could do an extra course that would help them to get there. So in terms of how math focused are the degrees, now if you're talking data science, well, very math focused there. And if you're talking information technology, not so much. And if you're talking computer science and SE, yes, there is some math focus there, definitely.
Thanks so much, Shekhar. There's a question about COVID-19, because of course we can't, not talk about COVID-19 these days. Maybe Tim, can you tell us how COVID-19 has transformed the industry?
Yeah, sure. I think the answer is in a lot of ways it's transformed a lot, and in other ways it hasn't at all. I think the biggest one has been in these interactions. In the end, the work that we're doing hasn't really changed. What's the big impact has been in communication. The ability to build relationships. I must say, you feel it, especially in consulting. Not being able to look someone in the eye and shake their hand has been, it's really changed the dynamic, and it's really required you to be a bit more innovative in sort of the way you engage people, and especially when you're trying to do small talk across Zoom. It's after sort of the first 10 meetings in a day, it gets a bit hard. It's been really innovative as well in the way it's allowed people to start to move around and be more flexible, both in times, way of working, adapting to the way that people learn, adapting to the way that people, which hours they're able to best work. It's going to be one that I think will leave a permanent impact on the way that we work, but I don't necessarily think it's going to be bad.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. The pandemic has just brought to the forefront how that we can change, and I think a lot of us will be working from home a lot more going forward, because we've realized that actually, we can work productively and effectively from home. We're seeing it amongst our students demanding to have the flexibility to continue to work from home. And we're definitely cognizant that, you know, there are both advantages and disadvantages to studying at home. And so building in that flexibility and making sure we have options for students with different needs, I think is a really important part of what we need to do as well. We are running out of time, so I'll just throw one last question out there, and you know, whoever wants to answer, feel free to jump in. Where have RMIT graduates ended up? We know that Tim is a manager at Deloitte, and that he's had this very successful career in consulting. Are there other success stories that you know about?
So I know a couple of others from the same IT course that I did. So one of them, she's actually sitting over in a marketing management position, which is a complete sort of pivot away from IT. Another one, he's who actually I was still quite close to. He's one of the statewide sysadmin managers for the VicEdu network. And then I've got there are others in HP retailing. In terms of large scale companies, the movement of product.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I know that we have alumni working for companies like Seek and Xero, and at the moment we have a good collaboration with MYOB, which is of course a small business accounting software. And you know, we have people, I guess, doing a whole range of activities. But some people working in government and contributing to government policy or government systems. We probably have a few people working for Salesforce that's been driving a lot of the contact tracing and managing the information related to the pandemic for the state of Victoria. Any other great stories that you can share, Shekar or James?
Definitely students at Telstra and ANZ as well. They're at almost more than one of those big four banks. Yeah.
And I guess in past times when we could travel, we've also had people end up overseas. So there's been some who've made it in Silicon Valley and other parts of the technical world as well. Mm-hmm. So if you want to look at the places where RMIT graduates have gone and put them on a map, you need a hell of a lot of pins, put it that way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. And even in our staff, we have some people who've done their bachelor's, their master's, their PhDs, and now running our Center for Industrial AI Research and Innovation. I'm thinking of Professor John Tangaraja, who's an RMIT alum himself. So, you know, research, industry, these are all options. And yeah, it's great to hear the diversity of roles that people have. Well, unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. And I just want to thank the panel so much for joining me and having this hopefully interesting conversation about what a career in IT might look like and what the characteristics of somebody who's going to be successful in IT are. And thank you for joining us out there. And thanks for all the questions that were contributed in the Q&A. Remember to check out our other live sessions on our Open Day platform, and we're going to have a main online event on Sunday, August 29th, and actually we're going to have some specific sessions on that date, the 29th, to discuss the programs that we offer in a little bit more detail. So James and I will be presenting about the different programs that you've heard about today on that date, and you can ask more detailed questions then. So thank you for joining, and we hope to welcome you to RMIT soon. Thanks again to the panel. Bye.